Welcome to Uncomfortable, conversations about culture and Christianity. My name is Eric, and today I'm joined by Alex.
Howdy.
And Mackenzie.
Hey.
And we have Silas here with us.
Hello.
How's it going? You are our guest. Welcome.
Thank you.
Okay, good. I'm glad we got the pleasantries out of the way. Thank you for being here, Silas. Silas is joining us today to talk about a topic that's probably facing a lot of people, not just high schoolers like yourself, but that topic is worry.
Yeah.
We're going to dive into that just a little bit later. But before we do that, we have to get to know you a little bit. And we have 3 questions we ask all of our guests. And I'd like to ask you those right now. The first question being, have you ever had a nickname? And if so, what is it?
Yes. So I've had a few. One time I was eating dinner with my family and I had a little salad because I was really tiny. I was probably like 5 years old. And everyone else had a regular size salad. And my brother thought mine looked like a side salad. So he's always called me side salad since then.
Side salad. Silas.
Yeah, but
That's
the more common one is just Cy. Just take off the last 3 letters there.
That one's easy. That one's
easy, yeah.
For those too lazy to say side salad, they just call you Cy.
Exactly.
Cool. It works in both ways.
Wait, but is that Silas?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Silas.
Yeah.
Okay. Sorry, I just had to clear that up for myself.
Yeah.
All right. Okay. All right, side salad. Second question. If you had a warning label, what would yours say? It's a side salad. Warning, side salad, this.
Warning side salad. Extremely passionate. I don't know.
Okay.
Or something like that.
Great.
I tend to go after stuff pretty hard.
Yeah.
But yeah, that can come across in different ways depending on who it's, if I want something changed in the household structure and my parents are there, I might not be able to approach that, the most polite way, not on purpose, but, just a little blunt, but
all right.
Sarcastic.
Passionate and sarcastic.
Yeah.
Okay.
Passionately sarcastic, maybe. I don't know.
Oh, that's a recipe for success.
Yeah. I mean, it's worked for Alex so far. So
it's good.
Just keep it down that path. Last question. What was the last book you read?
The last book I read was actually called Anxious by, oh my goodness, I should know her name. But anyway, it was published by the InterVarsity Press, which is an organization my dad works for. And it's about this topic, really. What inspired me to ask Alex if he wanted to do something or if the church was going to go into anxiety and worry at all. So it's just, it's about a 10-chapter book just surrounding the topics of fear, worry, anxiety. How are those different? How do they relate to each other? When can some of them be useful? When are they harmful?
Mm-hmm.
Then for school right now we're reading a book called The Canterbury Tales. It's a poetic book. I'm not a fan of poetry. I don't really.
Alex sounded like he was. That was kind of
I feel like I
excited noise
so
you made.
One admission, before college besides being a little kid, never fully read through a book. So in high school, I remember that OPS alum, just like Silas is at an OPS school, had to read that. But I think I brushed up with the story a little bit, but mainly asked my friends at lunch what was going on.
Did you say not through high school? Did you read a book?
Yeah.
I remember
an assigned book. So there's things I liked to read, but I never read one assigned book.
I remember in grade school having to do a book report, and I would always just pick the books that were based on the movies. So Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles 2, The Secret of the Ooze, the novelization. I knew the movie really well. Anyways, that book fits in well to why you're here, to talk about worry. Why don't you spoke a little bit about your passion. Why don't you tell us just a little bit about why you're passionate about worry and kind of raising awareness to that topic.
Sweet. So probably my biggest struggle, let me restart. So I'm like a lot of, I think, Christian youth at CCC and probably around the nation, in that we don't really have a defining, really hard challenge that was set on us at a young age. I had a good family. They did raise me in the church. I've been a Christian since I can remember. So sometimes teenagers my age are tempted to think that their story doesn't matter because they don't have any, like, I don't know, they didn't get cut in half by a car and then like God sewed them back together and now they're a star athlete kind of a story.
Yeah.
But
that was
what?
a good book. That was a really good book. So
Yeah, you like that? You should finish that book. Or,
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Anyway, my big challenge though has always been worrying that I'm not good enough to live up to the standards my siblings set academically, and they were both just super smart. They both got like 33s on the ACT and didn't get a B in high school, and loved to like shove that in anyone's face that would listen around the house. So like being in homeschool, not really knowing what to expect out of high school, because I didn't step foot in a public school until freshman year at Central. And so I was always under the impression that if I don't get all A's, if I don't get a high ACT score like they did, then like I don't have as much value. And that caused constant worry, like every single time, even on a homework assignment. If you don't get an A, I had the impression that you somehow like failed your family and your own like self-worth. And I think even if you're the oldest child, you can still experience that, depending on how your parents were, but.
Okay. Well, yeah, tell us just a little bit about, I guess about who you are and what you were, because you mentioned you're a CCC High School student. What does that really mean then? Like,
so I've been coming to CCC since I was like 5. I've loved the program here for the youth. Came to middle school. I went on a couple trips with Alex to Chicago, and been to a couple other mission trips, and I've loved the culture here. And yeah, CCC has been a big part of helping me combat that temptation to let worrying about my future seep into my life. Because when I do that, it's almost like I'm telling God that, like, yeah, I think you're all powerful and everything, except if I'm the one who has to determine like my future, because if I don't get good grades, then I'm not going to get a good job, and I can't complete your mission you gave to me. So it's like I'm not really giving that over to him. Mm-hmm. But I've heard a lot of good messages here at CCC, HSM, and in the large group setting and the access when that was a thing. But
you even gave a message a couple of years ago. So if people want to look in the archives, they can go listen to Silas Perry preaching there. So that'd be a fun time. So you're talking about worry and like growing up in a good Christian family and all of those types of things and like the pressures that come along with that. What would you say? Obviously, I think your parents are people that have tried to do right and raise you in church, and they want you to be educated and all that, and you've got a couple older siblings who are smart. One's like an engineer or something like that, doing crazy things, and then the other, I know my wife led her small group when she was younger. So they're brilliant, bright people, and then you're the third kid, right? That has all the pressures of what they accomplish, what they achieve, kind of always weighing on you, and they both are great people. And so, how would you say, for your parents, are there things that maybe they didn't know, or ways that they projected and put some of that pressure on you that as a third child you look back on now and you're like, man, this led to all that worry? Or is it all internal stuff? Are there external factors in your family? We're not saying to throw your parents under the bus here.
Right.
We love your parents, but like, what are some of those external factors that have led to that worry?
Yeah, I think inadvertently sometimes, when we would go to social events, and my brother and my sister would go with my dad and mom, and I don't know, at church or wherever it is, and we'd get introduced to like my parents' friends. They'd always like start off like talking about how like my brother, he's like almost has PhD, and then like my sister's a professional ballerina. And then like by the time they got to me, it's just like in sizes in high school, and I always felt like that's not good enough. Like I wish I had accomplished something better for them to like be proud of or tell. And I know that's not their intent whatsoever. Yeah. And parents should take pride and should tell people what their kids have accomplished. And like that's a fault of mine for taking that as I haven't done something that I should have done. But that's probably like rest of that is probably internal. That'd be the major thing, just like hearing a lot about how my parents talk about my siblings' accomplishments, almost like a form of jealousy, I guess.
Yeah, like their pride in them unbeknowingly like leads you to like insecurity and stuff like that. That makes sense. Cool. Yeah, thanks for sharing that.
That's good. Well, we've got a few questions here that we wanted to ask you specifically to on this topic. One of those is like, how do you know God is there when you're at school? Like when you're feeling worry or you're feeling anxious, like what's a telltale sign that you feel like God's got your back maybe in these situations?
Right. Okay. So I usually try and start my day with a devotional if I can. And one of the things that really helps is I do believe that everything we do has been orchestrated by God in a specific pattern, right? So if you read a devotional tomorrow morning, I do think that God put that devotional in your life that day because there's something in your day that's going to challenge you, and you can rely back on not necessarily a devotional. Maybe it was some conversation you had with like your wife or your mom before you ran out the door. So when I'm sitting there in school feeling really anxious or stressed or worried, generally I can think back to a time recently where God spoke into my life, just telling me to like give up control to him. So an example of this is last Sunday, we had a message at the HSM about the Holy Spirit and what the Holy Spirit is and how it lives in us. So we did an exercise of just like praying and asking the Holy Spirit to take control of our lives. So when I was in school yesterday and I was feeling really anxious, I just thought back to how in church when I was praying and asked the Holy Spirit to take control, I just did the same thing there, and you just get this sense of peace that kind of comes over your soul at that moment, and you just have a new mentality of, hey, I'm going to try my best on this, but it's not what defines me.
Right. That's good.
Can you tell us what, because I graduated high school like seems like a long time ago, like 14 years ago now. And so I think it's easy for us as like adults in here, like that are looking at our lives and the stages that we're at to be like, are you kidding me? Like what's going on in a high schooler's life that would even cause anxiety? Like, what does it look like? What's it look like just to be a high schooler? Like what do your days look like? What are those expectations for homework? What are like your social expectations, friendships? What does it just look like to balance life in high school? Because I think for a lot of adults, it's easy, like I said, to be like, are you kidding me? Wait until they're in the real world and then they'll really feel worry and anxiety and all that. So just help us relate and understand what life looks like there, and maybe we can compare and contrast what it looked like for us, or the listener can at least compare and contrast to the pace life was moving at then.
Yeah, so one of the things that faces me is a lack of sleep, because I wake up pretty early, about 6 o'clock, and then you go to school and you have to be attentive in all your classes. If you choose to go the route that challenges yourself, which I did because I felt like I had to, because my siblings did. So that means like honors courses and advanced placement courses, which if you don't know what that is, an AP course is like a college professor teaches at your high school, and it's basically a college load of homework. And then at the end of the year, you have to take like an additional test to make sure you pass. So I have those honors classes and those AP classes, one every 44 minutes. And there's 6 of those this year. And then I have a PE period, and then I go home. And I get home about 2:30. But then, generally that doesn't happen. That's if nothing is after school. But there's this huge pressure in our culture to, and it is good to some extent. You want to be involved in your school. I'd say in at least 1 or 2 things after school. But there's a huge pressure to you have to be in all these clubs and all these organizations, and you have to do a lot. You have to work a job. You have to pay for your own stuff. You have to have a car. If you don't have a car as a senior, like you're a loser. That's like people tell you that at school. So if you want a car, you need gas. You need gas. You need a job. So after school, you get home maybe for like half an hour, and then I usually go to work from like 5 to 8. So I have a little gap in there where I can try and cram some homework in. I'm going to take a breath here.
Yeah. I mean, I'm feeling anxious just listening to your day so far.
Yeah. So then you get home. I get home from work about 8:30, and I'm left with like, okay, I still have my calc homework to do, and I still have this essay that is due in like 3 days, but I also have a test to study for in Spanish. So if you want to do all that, you're gonna be up till like 1, 2 a.m. and that's on a good night. So you either have to like, okay, this is what I'm accepting to do bad on so I can get more sleep, or I'm going to try and do good on everything. And our culture tells us that you have to do good on everything, because your teachers will ask you like, hey, why didn't you study? And they won't understand if you say like, I needed more sleep or I needed to relax. They'll be like, you didn't need to like do nothing and sit there. And sometimes that's very valuable to do self-reflection time. So it's really difficult to find a balance between the schedule where like you have to, when you're not at work and you're not at school, you almost feel guilty if what you're not doing is studying, because you know, if you're out with friends, if like you're hanging out with friends, because I have a good like church friend group, when I'm with them, sometimes I feel like I shouldn't be pouring into these people's lives because I should be studying. And I've had to teach myself how to get over that over the years, and I'm better at it now than freshman year. But freshman year, I had like one friend at school. His name's Ethan. But now I have a ton of friends, and that's because I've like found a little bit better of a balance. But yeah, there's this pressure because you do have to study, but then also you have to have a social life, because if you don't have a social life, then you're a nerd, and no one wants to have a social life with you. So it's like, how do you get out of this cycle?
Oh, that's good. And I think that's big to understand. Yeah.
Oh yeah, I think there's studies even that have been done recently that show in an adolescent's brain, like you need more sleep than an adult. Like it's proven. And so like you're still on this schedule where you've got to be up early, you've got to be out the door and doing this, and then you're staying up late. And you know, I think in my teenage years, and like I could easily sleep till noon, 1 p.m. like if someone let me. And in some ways it's that's part of your body like growing and changing and all of that sort of thing. So it's almost scientifically proven that some of that's necessary. But here you're amidst like this culture and society that's just pushing you to go beyond that to a place that is almost unhealthy and almost unattainable in a way.
Yeah, they do say that even as adults, if you want to have good mental health, then you need to get good sleep. There, it's all connected. So you said, Silas, you've been reading a book. I don't know if you're finished yet. The differences between anxiety, worry, fear. Maybe, I don't know if you're able to kind of unpack maybe the differences between these words, since I feel like we've been kind of using all of them. Yeah. And
it's a very important distinction, because there's times when it's not a bad thing to be afraid. So in the book, the author described it as like, if you lived in Alaska, just put your house in Alaska, and you're living there, and you go outside to take the trash out, and there's like a grizzly bear's in your lawn. That initial response is like, oh no, I need to go back where it's safe, and you like your hair stands up, and you get really like, you know, fight or flight sensation. And you run back inside, or you try and fight the bear if you're Alex.
Yeah, that would be that's exactly what I would do.
But so that's a fear sort of a sense. There's an immediate threat that you have to respond to, and fear is there. God put a healthy fear in us to respond, to help us survive sometimes. And we're even commanded to fear God in the Bible. So fear is not necessarily a bad thing. And so then we have anxiety. I like to think of that as sort of the next step down. That's the fear of a possibility. So next time you go take your trash out, you might be a little bit fearful of, is there a bear near me? Looking around to see that, you know. So that's more like of anxiety is not, there's no immediate threat there, but there was one pretty recently, and you're afraid of the possibility of that immediate threat coming back. And then worry is basically you're taking either of those two very similar but distinct emotions, and you're letting them seep into where they don't need to be. So if you go back inside and the bear leaves, and for the next like week you can't sleep because of how terrified you are, that's worry, and that's negatively affecting your life, and that's not going to help. That's not helping you be more prepared if a bear comes back. That's not helping you show someone else that's relying on you that it's okay. All you're doing with that is just making your life more difficult. When you come down to the fundamentals of worry as a Christian, it's because sometimes we don't let ourselves fully accept the nature of God as a supreme being that is in control of everything. So that's how the author described it.
It's really good.
Yeah, I know for me, worry usually does relate to that, like my view of the world, my view of who God is, and a lot of times my wanting to be in control more. Like there's a control battle constantly happening in my life of where I feel like I'm not the one in control, where I can't control a situation, where maybe there's a predator outside my door like a bear, or there's pressure coming from work or wherever, that where I don't have control in my life, that's usually where I feel like I allow worry to start to seep in and, like you said, ruin healthy parts of my life because I'm just so consumed by worry. But I think that anxiety can point us to good things, point us to good help. If you're like, okay, there was a bear there last night, I'm a little anxious to go out because I don't know what I'm going to see. I'm not dealing with the bear situation at my house. It's just a possum and I'm afraid of it. And I see it on my Ring camera. And so I'm like, literally I go out there and I'm like, I hope I don't run into this thing because it'll hiss at me. But then you can let that, if I let that drive me every night, I'm never going to take out the trash. I never confront it, never figure out how I'm going to, its patterns, all that. Then that's what drives me to insanity and to worry and to things that I shouldn't be in. So.
Something that's been really helpful for me in my life. I think sometimes when we think of anxiety, we think of having like a panic attack. We think of people who are on medication. We think of all of these things. But I started noticing in my own life, I do have anxiety, but it's kind of a low-laying anxiety. So sometimes I'll be going through my life and I'll start to feel it. It's like down in my gut and I'm like, it's not like really intense, but I feel it affecting me. And I read a really good book for the residency program called Soul Care by Rob Reimer. And it talked about how if you feel that low level or low-laying like anxiety in your life, you should always ask yourself, what's the lie I'm believing? Because of the anxiety and the worry and the fear that we feel is connected to things that are not true, maybe necessarily about God or about our world or our lives. So that's been super helpful for me if I feel that low-level anxiety. Like, what am I feeling right now? What am I believing about God and about myself? And that's been super helpful for me.
Yeah, and oftentimes, like, the first step towards fixing this problem is admitting that, like, we have one. Yeah. Because I hear a lot of adults, when I talk to them about this, or fellow teenagers, that they'll tell me, like, oh, I don't worry. Like, I don't have a problem with that. But I mean, maybe they don't, and that's great for them. But, like, 99% of the time, when I get to talking with them more about how they are and how they're doing it, so they open up to me more. They'll tell me like all these stresses that are on their lives, but they're perceived as normal by society. Like Alex, you were saying how sometimes like work may worry you when you're at home or something. That's perceived as normal by society. So to a person who's not aware of all this, that would just seem like, well, I shouldn't. That's not technically worry, right? Because everyone else is doing it, so it must be good or normal.
Yeah.
So I'm curious, I'm curious because you have spoken on the big stage at church. You've spoken in the small stage at the high school ministry, and you also do a lot of your own, I would say, straight up preaching on social media. So do you ever feel anxiety or worry or fear in your speaking? That's something I feel when I get up to speak. I have to like pray for days before. So I'm curious about that in your life.
Oh yeah, absolutely. It terrorized me more than anything. That's why I think it's great to do. Because I think in the Bible, you can see some passages where Jesus gave out of places that people didn't expect him to give out of. Like, for instance, when he spat on dirt and healed someone's eyes with it, no one would look at Jesus and be like, "That man is a strong dirt spitter." Like that's not like, right? So when you look at someone and you think they wouldn't do that, I think God can do amazing things through that, because when we let God give out of our weaknesses for us, I don't think I've ever done any of my talking on my own strength, because I couldn't. But I think that God's taken my weakness of being afraid of people and being sort of lonely and fearful, and used that instead to give me strength in that area, because I'm relying on his strength to do it, not my own.
That's really cool.
Yeah, it is. It teaches you how to trust and teaches you how to rely on God, because I think our mode of operation usually is like I said, at least for me, how do I get it done on my own strength? And so it kind of forces you in uncomfortable situations to rely a little bit more on God in that. So yeah, that is cool. Good question.
So going back to social media, like you do a lot of on your stories, you do a lot of preaching or sharing about what God's teaching you and encouraging other people. My question, I guess, is also with social media. Do you experience anxiety when you use social media, or how do you think technology plays a role in students' lives?
Right. So I kind of
preach, or just people in general. I mean, definitely adults too.
Yeah, I kind of preach a double standard here. I think I will tell anyone who wants to listen that social media is absolutely atrocious to teenagers, or anyone's self-view. When it's used wrong, and it's used wrong by so many people that you can generally say it's pretty bad for the mentality of most teenagers. So what happened is, I know I'm guilty of this. My friends will post like 4 or 5 posts per, I don't know, a couple months, and it'll be the posts from when they went on trips or when they got like a super amazing achievement. And after a while, all you see on their social media is just like they went and climbed Mount Everest, and then they got accepted into this college for free, and then they are in the Bahamas now. And you're looking at your own life, and you're like, well, if that's their like day-to-day thing, they're posting about these kind of things all the time, then like what on earth is wrong with me? Why is my life just seem normal in comparison? So that, yeah, social media, I think, is, we can let it affect how we view ourselves easily, because you start to compare yourself, and that just compounds this worry problem, because now teenagers have to worry about, am I looking good on social media? Do I look attractive? Does what I do look fun compared to what my friends do? So yeah.
What do you think some of the issues are? I mean, speaking of the church, what are some of the issues that kind of, I mean, I think you're very bold to go on social media and share these opinions that you have and share your faith and things like that. But what do you think are the pressures that teens are facing when it comes to engaging with the church? Because I think when you're outspoken about certain topics, that can be looked down upon. Do you notice that with your own friends or the circles that you are involved in, or maybe even kind of just students in high school in general? Like, what are some of the issues you think they're most afraid to like deal with, because like if they were to talk about it in context of the church, they might be persecuted, or maybe become an outcast?
Okay, yeah. So how to answer that question? I think that everyone is fine talking about a few issues on social media. People like getting in political debates. That doesn't necessarily make people feel uncomfortable on social media, but yeah, when it comes into like, if someone brings their faith, like as a Christian, into a conversation at school on social media, that often becomes like a totally different debate, and everyone's just like, I mean, when I'm at school, my teacher brings something up that's directly like putting down the Bible, I will, I'll feel like, okay, I could stand up right now and like try and bring Christianity into this debate. But when I do that, and I have done it before, you do get weird stares around the room, and people do, you see them visibly get uncomfortable, because obviously whatever's being talked about, let's just say like it's abortion, they're already uncomfortable, and then when somebody tries to bring their faith into that, they're like, oh my goodness, like we're already talking about this, and now you're saying that Christianity is true and this is what it says, so therefore that's true. It gets very intimidating for people, especially non-believers, and you got to be careful, because you can easily drive people away from Christianity if you use it as like a means to win an argument.
Because it just kind of becomes the end-all answer to all arguments, and people kind of discredit it at that point.
Yeah, that's good. And I've seen like on your show, or the the Instagram lives that you do, that you've brought on people of other faiths, that like it's you and another person on there, like having dialogue and having conversation about like God and who God is and who Jesus is and things like that. What are like, how do you do that? Like, what does that relationship look like? Do you just find like a random guy that disagrees with you? Do you have relationships beforehand where there's a trust built, or and why are you doing that? Why do you think that's important?
Yeah, so I had a guy on there. I think you might have saw that podcast episode. He was of the Jewish faith. Goodness sakes, I can't talk. Jewish faith. Yeah. And we had known each other through other friends, but I had never even seen him in person before. So there was really no like trust, except whatever he's heard about me and whatever I've heard about him. So that made that a little bit interesting, but. Yeah, you kind of get a feel if you get this sense of this person wants to talk about it. So as a Christian, you ought to be careful not to play the, like, I'm right because I'm a Christian card. When I talk to people, I try and, like, ask what their opinions are first and make sure, like, they feel like they're being heard. And then I'll say, like I'll make sure I somehow show them that I've understood what they said, and then say, like, here's what I believe the Bible has to say on that, and like I am inclined to believe the Bible because I think Jesus rose from the dead, and so I'll share my opinion on that. And you want to, yeah, if you can manage, like on my podcast show, and I try to steer it away from more of a debate and like less of a debate and more of like just talking about different beliefs, that's when like good conversation can happen and trust can be built, even when you're talking about opposing viewpoints.
That's good. What are some practical implications for people who are listening to this right now, to kind of like good takeaways for them to go, hey, maybe they have a high school student, maybe they're a parent, or maybe they're older and they're just like so far removed they can't even remember what it's like to be a high school student. Maybe, like Alex said earlier, they're kind of brushing this off as, well, this isn't really an issue, you'll get past it, it's whatever. But like, what are some practical takeaways for people to, like, how can they help? What's really encouraging to you? What could someone say to you or do for you? And we're not asking people to do it for you specifically, but just in general, right?
I would say a big thing that helps whenever my parents tell this to me, when I'm really stressed, I come to them with like a test, and I'm just say, I think I need to do this well, and I don't think I'm going to be able to. They just say like, whoa, like take a breath, and then tell me like your best is good enough for you. And there's a difference between being prepared and obsessed, and I would really encourage people to find that fine line, because you can go home and it's good to prepare for the next day. There's no harm in that. But it's not good to obsess over it, because then you start ignoring the people in your lives. Like the most important relationship is our relationship with Jesus, and that can often get ignored as well if you're just obsessing about doing so much for work or for school. So I would take, find your balance between obsession and being prepared for the next day, and that's going to help you attack the worry problem. And then also just being willing to have a conversation with people. Our world is full of people who, they appear intimidating on the outside, but when you just, everyone wants to feel a connection to someone, and everyone wants to talk. And if you just give someone a chance to share their opinions somewhere, even just to you privately, like to be heard by somebody is just a huge act of love that you can show that person, especially as Christians, when we can just show that we care about what you think. Even if you completely disagree with what I think, I still want to talk to you, and I still think you have value. Mm-hmm. So
that's good.
I think one thing that drives anxiety in our world, for a lot of probably older people, especially I think I see it in the church, maybe more prevailing than other places, probably because I spend a lot of my time in the church, is there's an anxiety about looking at young people, looking at the next generation. They look at my generation, some older people are like, they are messing it all up. They stop singing the songs that we love to sing. They don't dress the way that we think you should dress in church. They're just ruffling everybody's feathers. They're putting their sermons on the internet. That's crazy. So I think there's always, generations that get worried. They get anxious about everything, and for good reason, because they've poured their lives into the ministries that they've been a part of in the church, and poured their bank account, and they've sacrificed a lot of things. And so they're passionate about it. Like you said, passion is a good thing. And so they don't want to see it all fall apart. And so I think there's a natural anxiety when change happens for people to freak out. But I want to know from you, like, what do we have to be hopeful for in the church? As you look at you and you look at your friends and your peer group and the things that drive you all, what would you say to people that are worried about the future of the church, that it's all going to collapse? CCC is a church that's about to turn 100. The people that are like, is it going to make it to 105? Is it going to make it to 110? What would you say to those people to give them hope about your generation and the future of the church, what you're passionate about?
I would start by just asking, like, well, who's in control of the next generation? Because I have friends that were raised very poorly by their parents, and now they are outstanding Christians who are outspoken. I just saw a transformation in my friend Ethan. He became a Christian like 2 weeks ago, and no one would have predicted that if you would have looked at how their parents raised them. So the main, like, a good point is that you can raise your kids very well or very poorly, but in the end, it's their relationship with God, and God's got them in their hands. That's going to determine what they do with their life. And I don't think it's God's mission to have CCC, disappear within the next 6 years. I don't think it's God's mission for the next generation to not carry the torch. I think it's God's mission to even further expand that. And that's why I'm passionate about talking about Christ wherever I can, because I think it is God's mission that the whole world be reached. And, it's a fact that every day we're closer to the end days, no matter when those are, right? And I think as we approach those, more and more people are going to start vocalizing their opinions, both for and against Christianity. And I think a great thing the older generations can do just to help themselves have hope, and even help the younger generations have hope, is just tell them and pray for them and trust them in person. Like, how can I pray for you in your faith? How can I help you in your faith? Be a mentor to somebody. Help raise somebody else's kids that aren't even yours. Go on prayer walks with families that live in your neighborhood. Because if you start to ask and help the next generation, you're not only going to start to believe in them more, but you're going to start feeling that impact on yourself too. Because if you believe in something, if you believe in somebody, if you start to care about them, you're gonna have less and less doubt that they're not gonna do what you think they should, or what God's plan is for their life. So, like, instead of just vocalizing worry about it, because it is scary. I mean, teenagers do a lot of stupid things, and I understand why that's a common thought in the older generation's minds. But what they can do to be helpful with that is just to, despite that, take a leap of faith and try and pour into someone's life that is a young person, and try and show them what they should be like when they get older. Try and be that role model for them.
Yeah, that's really good. It's powerful stuff.
Yeah, that's so good. I know, like, from a decade of student ministry, that was always my encouragement for people that wanted to hate on the next generation or have lack of confidence, or you do a student takeover and people would freak out over, like, a kabuki drop or something, that they're like, they shouldn't play the guitar sideways instead of the normal way because that's probably demonic or whatever, was always to encourage them to, like, be in the presence of students, to, like, disciple them, to have a conversation, because I think if you actually do that, you're going to see and be a cheerleader for the next generation and see so much impact in all they have. Or you can just listen to the news and see all, like, the projected bad things and see social media and all that kind of stuff, and you can project what you think is going to happen in the next generation. But I just drives me nuts when people want to complain and they don't want to be part of the solution and have skin in the game. And so, yeah, thanks. And I know, like, we believe in you, that's why we're grateful to have you on this show. And
appreciate that.
We have people on here that are experts around topics, but you're living, like, we're so far removed even from high school.
You're literally an expert at being a teenager.
Yeah.
I should
There's
hope so.
not anyone else, I'm not an expert at being a teenager anymore, so bummer for that. I try to think I am, but
no, yeah, we do really appreciate you coming in. I know it might be, like, a little bit intimidating to come in and talk to these three strangers. Well, maybe Alex isn't much of a stranger, but here, just open up to us and confess everything. And no, that's awesome. Thank you for doing that, giving us a little insight to what kind of social pressures you're facing. And I think that's going to be really helpful for people who are listening. Thanks, everybody, for listening. Thanks, Silas, for being here. And if you guys have any questions or you want to reach out to us on social media, you can do that at CCC Omaha, or you can email us at podcast@cccomaha.org. Until next time, we will talk to you then.